Hi, and happy Easter to you. I've been asked to say a few words about why Easter is important to me, and I hope these are going to be helpful. I was actually driven straight back to the Bible and a verse that's really important to me and summarises really what Easter means to me and the difference it makes in my life. And it's a verse from Philippians chapter 3 and verse 10. I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow to attain to the resurrection from the dead. When I think of Easter, I don't just think of Easter Day. I see Easter Day as the culmination of a series of events over Jesus' ministry. But Easter Day is the high point. Easter Day is the point where we realise what Jesus' message was, that those who follow and trust in him need not fear death because he's broken the power of death. That by rising again, he showed that death is not the end, and that whatever challenges and difficulties we face in life, the best is yet to come. And I find that a tremendous source of motivation and encouragement. I find that gives me a resilience in the difficult times to keep going, that however good or bad things are, the best is yet to come. And that's a tremendous message of hope for us in our current situation. Death is not the end. Suffering is not going to have the last word because of what Jesus achieved and the fact that he was raised from death. But there's a challenge in there for my everyday life. And the challenge is, how do I experience that resurrection life here and now? It's one thing to look forward to it in the future, but what about now? And what Paul says is that if we want to know Christ, if we want to know the power of his resurrection, then we're going to have to share in the fellowship of his sufferings, becoming even like him in his death, which is a really extreme way of putting it. But if we want to attain to the resurrection from the dead, that's the path we have to follow. It takes me back to that song, if you can't bear a cross, you can't wear a crown. Easter Day points me back to the sufferings of Good Friday, just as Good Friday points me forward to the joy of the resurrection on Easter Day. And I just wonder whether at this time some of us have begun to experience that resurrection power in the midst of these difficult times. Whether you've experienced the love of a friend or even a stranger, someone who's helped you, someone who's come alongside you and lifted you up. I wonder if you've been able to show that concern and care for others, which has lifted them up. We, for instance, have managed to make contact with a neighbour who we've lived close to for 25 years and not really got to know them at all. And suddenly we're able to talk to them in a completely different way, on a different level, and to share in something of their life, which is actually quite a challenging life. So Easter points me forward to that resurrection life, which I can hardly imagine, can't really describe, haven't got the words to describe what that eventually will be like. But it points me back to showing and experiencing the love of God in the here and now, particularly in situations of suffering and of darkness, and discovering that the light of Christ, the hope of Christ, is actually in those situations. They're not to be avoided, they're not to be sought, but they are where we can find that resurrection power and just begin to have a first taste of that power in our lives that one day in the future we will experience in all its fullness.